All right, everyone, welcome, beloved. So good to see a delicate, yet dynamic, and just distinguished voice that we are so blessed to have with us today. Our sister Zuri McClelland. Zuri, so thankful for you to be here with us. Real quick, I just got to break down just some very powerful things that you need to know about this sister. Zuri is a scientist and PR strategist, a science communicator to be specific. I remember crossing paths with her when I was in grad school on the south side of Chicago, doing a lot of powerful work around faith, around finance, around food. And I'm just so thankful that we have this opportunity to just be in dialogue. For those of you all who are just tuning in for the first time and don't know the voice that you're hearing right now, I'm the Reverend Louis Tillman, one of the guest editors as well. So without further ado, thank you, Zuri, for being here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Louis, and thank you, Chris, for having me on the podcast today. And I really look forward to chatting with you both.
So Zuri, could you just tell us a little bit about your story?
I think you did a pretty good intro there. I'm definitely a scientist by trade, and that's kind of the crux of who I am. I guess I would also say that I'm a creative. I love to write and do videos and things like that. I am also just a deeply spiritual person. At the moment, I'm based in Virginia, kind of grew up here, kind of spent some time in Illinois, California, New York, and so on, and kind of made my way back to Virginia recently. And I get to work with some amazing companies doing scientific communications. And that's kind of my day to day at the moment.
So can you just tell our listeners, how did you get into science? Because I know as a young Black woman, it was like Hidden Figures before Hidden Figures, right? So what really got you into that? Because that is something that is so unique.
Yeah, I've always known I wanted to be a scientist. Like science was always something that I was interested in at a young age. So I was the kid who'd go into our kitchen and start mixing random things together to see what would kind of create a reaction. I was a kid who was building things out of other random objects in our home. So that science background was always there. And I remember taking like an astronomy class in high school, and I was just blown away. And, for us here on the planet, like every little thing seems to matter. But when you look out into space, it's just like you realize how little what we're doing here actually matters. And I just loved that uncertainty of it all. And so I ended up just deciding to study physics with the hopes that I would actually one day be able to study astronomy. And that was not my path. I didn't quite get there, but I do science every single day and I still love it, even though I'm not in the lab.
So the thing I really loved about what you just shared, and I'm just like so intrigued to just know more about is I don't know a lot of Black scientists, whether it's in research, whether it's in the lab, anything. I know they exist. And then on top of that, a lot of Black female scientists. I remember when I was in school in Kenosha, Wisconsin for my undergrad, Racine, Wisconsin, which is right up the street. That's where S.C. Johnson's labs and headquarters were out of. And I probably saw like two people of African descent in the science department and research and development. The rest of the folks working like accounting, PR, HR, anything under like the business development component. So I'm just curious, like, what is it like existentially and just personally, if this is your experience of being the only person like you, and let me get very descriptive with it, the only young Black female in that field or in the office or in the lab. What is it like? And I mean, how do you persevere through it all?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, when I was studying at Berkeley doing my physics degree, I remember looking around the class and one day realizing, oh, I'm the only Black woman here in a class of maybe 50. And it used to really bother me. It used to like really, really bother me that there weren't any other Black females. But, once I came out of that environment and started volunteering at different organizations and just meeting people through different avenues, I learned that there's actually a lot more females of color who do science than I think we really realize. And some of my closest friends and confidants, they're all females and they're all doing science and engineering. That's that we all congregate with each other. And so I think that a lot of us may not even think about it. We kind of just go in and we kind of do the work. And for me, at least recently, it doesn't bother me so much anymore. I am still the only Black person at most agencies that I've worked with. And I'm probably like one of the few Black people that our clients get to see. And I get to be that example, which is great. So for me, I guess it's just not something that kind of comes up very often anymore. But when I was younger, it was something that definitely bothered me. And I think as I've gotten more experience and kind of just met other women doing, science and research, that, there are going to be more of them out there. And we're continuing to grow the field and we're continuing to kind of take over the field more and more. But I have no doubt that things will get better at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear. To get Christological for a minute, heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I'm just thankful that you have the tenacity and veracity to stand in those circles and in those rooms. So it's just very powerful to hear your testimony on that. I want to shift into a different direction real quick because you said the S word, you said spiritual. And when I think of my fellow millennials, I'm often reminded that some folks, they identify as spiritual and not religious. I just kind of want to hear your definition and your take on spirituality.
Yeah, I grew up in the Baha'i faith, mostly in Virginia, actually. My mom became a Baha'i when she lived in Atlanta, right around the time when I was like 1 year old. So I really did grow up in the Baha'i faith. And the Baha'i faith it's a world religion that kind of came out of the Middle East. And Baha'is believe that there's one God, all the religions are one, and that men and women are equal. But we also believe that religion is progressive. So each kind of religion came at a time when it was needed and brought a message to the people during that time. So even after the Baha'i faith is kind of done, there will be another religion. And so that's what we kind of believe in, is that all religion is progressive. And, when I was younger, the Baha'i faith really was a big part of my life. It was my Sunday. Like I remember going to Baha'i school on Sundays. And then I think that with time, I came very deeply entrenched in the Baha'i faith. And I even at one point was working for the National Center. And, I think at some point I saw religion differently during that time, especially when you're in kind of the crux of where the religion is based. It has a different form. And so with time, I found that I wasn't relating to a lot of the Baha'is kind of in that circle. And I think it's interesting that you kind of mentioned, especially for millennials, a lot of millennials don't, engage with religion. And I, for one, kind of understand that. Like I haven't been super involved in the faith, but I do absolutely consider myself spiritual. And I do believe in a lot of the tenets of the Baha'i faith. And so I think nowadays, a lot of us, especially the younger people among us, are looking for something that isn't like strictly religious, but gives them the foundation for morals and for the support that religion gave to our parents or our grandparents. And so what does that look like in this kind of new era? I think we're trying to figure it out. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but hopefully, with time we can kind of get there.
Zuri, I wanted to ask a kind of a broad question about your motivation to become a science communicator in this theme of transformation? Like I heard you say, sharing this information helps people to become more curious about the world. And I'm assuming that you place a real value on that curiosity. Like we need to be a more intellectually curious and I think sort of reality curious world. If you're comfortable with talking about it, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that motivation to get into science communications and to do things on your own.
So I guess my vision is to really help more people in general just be more open to ask more questions and to be more curious. That is the vision that I'd love to kind of bring forth in kind of everything that I do, whether it's working in PR and helping science companies, or it's working on YouTube, making videos and helping people just rethink about a situation. So yeah, I think those are kind of my values.
That's really exciting to me to hear because that's a different facet of really what facilitates transformation. And so the very first interview we did, you may not know Marcus Carr, works in Minneapolis, connecting youth in disadvantaged neighborhoods to local regenerative agriculture. And what I found most amazing about Marcus's interview, it came down to when Lewis was saying sort of what is transformation. He just started talking about how he engages people. And what he was sort of demonstrating was that he approaches them in an open way, just what you said. And then he starts the conversation. He's curious about them. So anyway, I think we haven't heard that stated, what you just said, this idea of becoming more open and more curious as a sort of social value. As someone who also has a real love of the hard information that science will give you, the data, as it were, and longs for a society whose journalism values real information instead of just emotional manipulation and so forth for headlines and clickbait and that kind of thing. I have been amazed in the last, number of years to see sort of curiosity become uncool. To hear that coming out of the root or the basis of underneath your science communications passion connects to the spiritual wisdoms, you could say, other people are sharing. Maybe your upbringing gave you this desire to see more people be connected through their curiosity. And, that's an authentic way of knowing each other. What it seems like we're learning is that as Marcus was kind of demonstrating, the more we can know each other, the more we can be in relationship together, the more curious and open we are towards each other, towards the world around us, the more it will transform in the ways that it's supposed to, instead of us being blocked in various ways from right transformations.
There was this quote from E.E. Cummings, the writer, and it goes, the most wasted of all days is one without laughter. And it's probably my favorite quote because I love laughing. Laughter is my thing. And if I could take that quote and tweak it a little bit, I would replace laughter with curiosity. And I really do believe like the most wasted of all days is one without curiosity. The openness to be vulnerable, to ask questions, to look like you don't know something, to really start to connect with ourselves, with other people, with our environments in ways that we haven't in the past. And I would just appreciate that more from kind of all of us. And we're all working on it individually, so I can't fault anyone personally, but I'd love to see more of that, in the world today.
When we were talking, Zuri, 2 days ago, the kind of subject of family came up. If you could talk about the way that, the internal groundings that you have made it easier for you to see yourself in a transformed future, or to develop the skills to envision transformation.
That's an interesting question. I think the biggest thing for me, I guess it's kind of twofold. I grew up in a working class family, so that was motivation enough for me to extend myself. I didn't have a lot at risk. Like I wasn't going to lose everything because there wasn't much anyway. So I had the opportunity to try a lot of different things. And even me, myself, I haven't tried as much as like my older brother. He's gotten much further on the spectrum. But I also think that thankfully I had a parent, my mother, who was always trying different things. I saw her move across the country. I saw her leave jobs that were toxic. I saw her try this new skill she's never done. And seeing someone that I know try something different and do it, even if they didn't do it well, but still doing it and seeing that they were okay was enough for me to say, okay, I can try things and I can do something different and I'll be okay. Like, and it can actually make me a better person. So having that example, I think really helped me at the end of the day.
This topic of transformation is actually evidence again of my white privilege in a way, of the gap between these cultures, or the gaps, in that the way that the community that I'm most dominantly involved with wants to talk about things is always in this sort of top down, what kind of tweaks can we make? How can we move forward together? These kinds of ideas that are right. But what I've really learned in the last year is that, we have a crisis of empathy also. That's sort of what's missing first and foremost, that we're not humane towards ourselves or each other. And then I also I don't think it's racial at all. I think it's the economics and the culture and the kind of conditioning that we have in our larger society that has made this conversation around transformation itself really challenging. It's a fun idea if you have some privilege, is kind of what I'm saying, economic privilege. It's a foreign idea if that's something you wish you had. And that's another lesson I feel like is coming from these interviews, which I'm embarrassed about. I'm embarrassed to, be on a tone deaf part of that spectrum. But I'm curious if you guys feel that way, because I thought this topic of transformation wasn't so intellectual. I thought it was more visceral. Like, how do we change the world to make it more the way we want it? And I'm finding that people are like having a hard time relating to the empowerment of what is it you want to see the world be? What is wrong with the world? How should it change? We know we need transformations in a variety of ways. We could have talked about Black Lives Matter, and we could have talked about, any number of issues about integrity in our institutions. And of course, there are the environmental concerns that we're kind of focused on here. And then the depravity continues, and the distance between the haves and the have-nots seems to be getting more intense. So there's so many issues, and it's hard to know how to approach that. And that's why I thought transformation, this is a common hub, change things. And now I'm feeling like, you know what, it's a hard concept, transformation.
I I don't know what Luce is gonna say, but for me, transformation and the ability to think about transformation is a privilege. It is purely a privilege in that I'll give a very small example of I'm a scientist. I was educated in very complex ideas. I should be making lots of money. I came out of grad school, did not make lots of money. And I remember the day I chose to buy reusable like Ziploc baggies. And that was the moment in which I could actually think about the environment. This was at least, I think it was a good like 4 or 5 years out of grad school where I could even think about something outside of what was kind of going on in my world.
Just getting your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your rent, your books, your whatever, like just getting everything done. And
and even more so the like to add on to, outside of those material objects, the racial pieces that kind of go on, I mean, this was during the pandemic, so there was a lot of the Black Lives Matters, George Floyd, all of that was going on. So the mental energy going into that as a Black person was taking up a lot of my energy. The relationships that I was having were taking up energy. And so the opportunity to even think about something as little as recycling or, making time to think about other things outside of myself just wasn't there. And I think we underestimate how many people are truly struggling. There are so many people who are just trying to get by. And if we don't help those people to just get by, they're not going to be able to even think about the next steps in their life. They're not going to be able to think about the transformation or even curiosity or anything like that. Because I do still feel like it's privileged space. It really is. So I don't know what Lewis has to say.
I mean, you summed it up. I mean, it's definitely privileged territory, and I think there's a lot of equitable ways that we all contribute to transformation. I think the privileged part of it is we all don't have equal access to creating our contribution to transformation. This is what I mean. If you have a blue passport that says United States of America and you haven't committed a felony, all that stuff, like you actually have that in your possession, you are privileged. We all have rights in this country. It's just some of us don't have first class rights. So part of my challenge with the Black diaspora is we get comfortable in this season of, all right, how do I just get my hand out? Like the world owes me something. And they could be 100% right. I mean, I don't know everybody's story. But then there's also this metocracy of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And I'm not sure if we had shared this before in just off record conversation, but this is where the privilege component of comes in is, yeah, you could say pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, but we have to identify that it's a privilege to even own boots in the first place. So now everybody is walking around with boots that even have the straps to pull themselves up by.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, I'm preaching now, so let me stop. But when I think of a lot of parallel I have with Zuri is, yeah, I mean, the syllogism is you go to school, get that degree so you can get that job. And it's like 6 figures is success. If I hear the word 100,000 or 6 figures one more time, I'm going to scream. And success, unfortunately, in this society is predicated off of performance. So with all that being said, I think that we have to reclaim our own stories and reclaim what transformation looks like for our own social context instead of allowing society to define and claim it for us. But as much as we want to talk about how there's not equal access to opportunity, there's a lot of access to it. I think you just have to find curious and uncomfortable ways to reach it. And that's something that I just love about Zuri's story, because I do share a lot of it. I mean, I'm educated and all that good stuff too, but I'm not making the money I want to make, right? So how do I reject what an older Black methodology is and start adopting the ways of carrying the baton for a different race in a different direction of, this is the way I want to live the rest of my life on this earth. And I want to passionately live into the purpose that my higher power has given me.
I love all that. And I know we got to go, but can I ask Zuri one more question?
Yep.
This is directly off Lewis. Really inspired this collection moving in this direction when you and I spoke a year and a half ago, and you were making really strong and good critiques, righteous critiques of the institutionalism that is blind to its own prejudices and imbalances. And that for us, maybe to some degree as males or whatever, is the thing that we tend to, want to fight against. I see Zuri having navigated that differently, and I don't know how. She doesn't seem like she went in and told people, that there were problems, like my approach, which is to say, we got to fix this. That Zuri, you found a way to be in the flow of the institution and yet not lose your identity, be part of the change. Maybe you haven't been as negatively affected by bad institutional culture as Lewis has or as other people have. I don't know how you feel about that. But anyway, you're non-confrontational in the way that you seem to navigate the world. So I just wondered if you could speak on that a little bit, being a person, again, sort of a change maker, a transformer.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm naturally non-confrontational. I think also being a female, we're kind of taught to be non-confrontational. So it's kind of part of it. But I think that, well, I will say that when I was in high school, I took part in a conflict resolution workshop, and I learned a lot about conflict and how to resolve it during that time. But I also think that, I don't know if it's just growing up in the Baha'i faith or if it's because I'm naturally inclined to being curious, that I try to look at things from other people's standpoints, and also just trying not to take things personally. Like, very rarely do I feel like I'm being attacked, because most often the things that are being said about me, towards me, about people who look like me, aren't about me as a person. They aren't personal because people don't know me personally. And so I think that's kind of just how I look at things. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
It does. Thank you. And it gets back to the whole idea of, your family experience and how you kind of came into your own identity in a rooted way.
Right.
I think social justice is an extremely broad topic, and I think the work that you're doing definitely can be categorized as social justice because, again, you're representing, whether it's a privileged group or a group that you're now entering into that didn't find you privileged enough. You are breaking barriers and creating history, and it's not done in a day. I mean, you've dedicated your life to it. So these are things that really do lead to social and historical and existential transformation. Zuri, thank you so much for just being with us, for dropping knowledge as usual.
Thank you so much, Lewis and Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you both, and it was great. I loved it.
Thank you, Zuri.